treat it like a part-time job that can pay off down the line. Know that you won't necessarily get 100% of everything you apply for, but you get 0% of the things you don't apply for.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Office Hours. My name's Will Geiger, where each week I'm unpacking the latest trends in higher education and what those trends mean for students and for families. I'm really excited about today's guest, Jamie Williams, who is the Senior Director at the Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation. Welcome, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, I would love just if you could share a little bit more about your
Mhm.
background, Jamie. I think that would be a really great place to start for the listeners out there.
Yeah, sure. As Will said, I'm Senior Director of Scholarships and Enrichment Programs at the Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation. The Scholars Foundation started in 1986 as a combination of celebration between the Coca-Cola Company and the Coca-Cola bottling system to celebrate the centennial creation of Coca-Cola back in 1886. We awarded our first scholarships in 1989. We will be awarding our 39th cohort of $20,000 scholarships in the coming year to high school seniors around the country. It's a U.S.-based scholarship. So if you're in the 50 states, D.C., Puerto Rico, or some Department of Defense-based schools, you're eligible to apply. Before I joined the Scholars Foundation, coming up on my 11th year with the foundation, but before that, I worked at several college campuses, mostly with high-ability, high-achieving students through merit scholars programs and through different honors programs and honors colleges at both public and private universities, and joined the Scholars Foundation a few years ago when this opportunity arose. And I always thought that I would retire having worked my entire career on college campuses. I love college students, love working directly with college students. But what this position and what the Scholars Foundation allow for me to do is scale up the impact that I'm able to have through the financial impact of scholarships and through the leadership and personal professional development programming that I spent my career building and have been able to do here for the last decade plus now.
Yeah, thanks so much for that overview. And it seems like such a great segue working with students on specific college campuses to the work at Coca-Cola. And I'm sure it's a pretty interesting just to get to work with students who are going to be attending a variety of different institutions from all over the country.
Yeah. We award 150 scholarships every year to the cohorts, and they go to 40 to 50 different schools. A good chunk go to a lot of highly selective schools, but we have students who stay closer to home for maybe family reasons to go to maybe a public institution, a regional institution, and maybe transfer to another school. But the cool thing about our scholarship is that recipients have 10 years to use it. So if recipients have other scholarships that they've received that they have to use for undergrad, they can defer using our scholarship maybe until they go to graduate school. But the especially cool thing is the diversity of students I get to work with. They're from every state and territory that we serve. And when they graduate, they move into every industry imaginable. We have students, scholars who move into every level of government, local all the way to federal, who work for the UN, for NASA, for Disney. And we also have students who go on to win awards for being the top middle school science teacher for a very rural part of the world that they live in. So the diversity and scale and range of what our scholars are doing is really impressive. And what's most important is that they are finding ways to have impact wherever they are, both in their schools and their communities.
Yeah, no, that's and just to kind of highlight that's a wonderful policy. Just the 10 years, I know that's something we come across more often than I'd like. Just the issue of scholarship displacement, and I think that's just like
Mhm.
such a great student centered policy, just to
Yeah.
ensure that students have a little bit more flexibility in how they use
Mhm.
their scholarship funds. And for students who are not aware of this, it's essentially when a student's attending a college and they're receiving so much need-based financial aid or other scholarships that like the scholarship can't like legally help them and improve their aid
Mhm.
situation. And some scholarships will allow for deferrals and for
Mhm.
scholarships for graduate school or summer school, just some other options. So that's one of the most generous policies that I've heard of, which is really great.
Yeah, we want to make it as flexible as possible so that our recipients get the full financial benefit of the award that they worked hard to receive when they were seniors in high school.
And I'm sure there's just the nature of the students who are winning the Coca-Cola, just high achievers who are probably attending some of the institutions with some of the most generous financial aid in the
Right.
in the world. So I'm sure that's particularly helpful for those students where they're just going to be for many students probably unlikely to have gaps in their financial
Right.
aid. packages. And also, yeah, just really interesting to hear about the diversity of the students, and then the Coca-Cola alumni network that they're
Hmm.
joining. I think that can, sometimes be a really underrated, part of winning a scholarship for students, as you're part of this community. And yeah, I was just curious if you could speak a little bit more to that. I mean, that part of the value, just that's something I really do think sets the Coca-Cola program apart from other scholarships.
Yeah, we're not the only scholarship organization that says this, but we do say we're more than just a scholarship. Uh, Really, when you're named a Coca-Cola Scholar, you're invited to join a community of nearly 8,000 people back to 1989, the first cohort of recipients who are, again, leaders in their industries, leaders in their community, who are really making profound change wherever they are. They see ways to improve the world around them, and they step up and do that. And so really they're being invited to join that community. And the scholarship, yeah, if they use it all during college, that's 4 years. They've got the rest of their lives and the rest of their career to be a part of this community. And we really invest in cultivating the ongoing leadership and professional and personal development of our scholarship recipients. We have a lot of virtual programming we do throughout the year that a colleague works on developing. What are some skills or knowledge that our scholar community say they would like to know more about? And we know, because we have almost 8,000 people out there, we know we have expertise within that community who can share their expertise on those topics. But we also do a lot of in-person social receptions, leadership service oriented activities and initiatives throughout the year, as a way to kind of, again, cultivate that community and feel part of something bigger than just simply receiving a check or a disbursement through an electronic disbursement through the financial aid or bursar's office each year. So that's the thing that really keeps them coming back. We Through our offboarding process, when scholars graduate from college, we ask them a series of questions just to figure out the impact of receiving our scholarship and being a part of this community. And nearly 9 out of 10 tell us regularly that not only did they attend their first choice college, but they were able to do so because the Coca-Cola Scholarship had a significant impact on their college choice. And we do some ongoing impact assessment, and the scholars tell us that they're more likely to give of their time and talent to show up for our activities, our events, for each other than they are to other organizations maybe that provided them funding, and in some cases more likely than their alma maters if their colleges come calling, and they're willing to show up for us because of the way we've shown up for them, and again cultivated this community that shows up for each other.
Yeah, and I think just such an important, I think, thing for students to be thinking about as far as their college journey. Like, it's kind of cliche, but it truly is a launching pad. And I sometimes think, in my experience, the students who sometimes are from historically underrepresented backgrounds, maybe they're the first
Mhm.
in their family to graduate from college, they may not have the same networks or relationships, or sort of kind of this cultural capital, to
Mhm.
navigate jobs and internships and like what might come next. And that is just a wonderful part of this, and
Mhm.
scholarship program, that you do have access to this network and the support, even after you graduate college.
Yeah. I'll
But
say I'm very particular and pay close attention to those applicants who themselves are first generation college students who come from under resourced areas. That's my background. I'm the first in both sides of my family to go to college. I've benefited greatly from many scholarships. So I think it's kind of fate that I ended up in this kind of industry
yeah,
because I know the impact that it has. I know a lot of times those students from under-resourced schools or under-resourced communities may see our list of scholars and think, "Oh, I haven't founded 19 nonprofits," and that's and some do, maybe not that many, but some do are very busy and do those kind of things. But what's more important is that they have led and had a positive impact in their schools and community wherever they are. So I often say that rural part of Kansas may not have as many opportunities as a student going to school in Manhattan or Brooklyn, but there's need wherever you live and there's opportunities wherever you live. So it's more important the depth and scale of the impact that you are having with how you've chosen to spend your time outside of class than a long list of things. So that's something I would encourage those who may be discouraged by looking at our list not to rule yourself out. We want to see your application.
yeah, absolutely. I remember when I began my college admissions career, just my director of admissions, the number one thing he drilled into us was just, it's all about like the context of the student and their school and their opportunities. And I think, like, yeah, sometimes students just are not aware of that, but it really is the it really is the case. I think especially, among selective admissions processes or selective
Hmm.
scholarship programs.
Right.
To segue a little bit, Jamie, I know the application's going to be opening in a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
I know our students and families are always really like interested in like, what goes on in these decision making processes.
Hmm.
So I guess for you, what are some of the, I know you mentioned this a little bit, but like what are the
Hmm.
qualities or attributes that the selection committee and application readers are looking for in
Hmm.
students who might be good candidates for this scholarship?
Then, yeah, I'll start with an ad for the application itself. So we open at 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday, August 3rd, and close at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, September 30th. So depending on when you're watching this, we're about to open or we are open, and hopefully we didn't just close if you're a high school senior. So you've got 2 months to submit that application. What we know is that we see on the back end of the data, and users tell us it takes about 20 or 30 minutes to submit our phase one application. So if you have a transcript in front of you where you self-report your grades honestly and accurately, and then a listing of your leadership, service, involvement, and work that you do in your school and community, you can copy and paste that, or you can transcribe that over to our application. But what we look for beyond that is a demonstration of taking advantage of the opportunities that are available to you wherever you live. Again, if you're in a more populated area, there may be more opportunities, but we've had a young man from Louisiana a couple of years ago. He was a parish fire chief, and he was 17 years old because nobody was doing it, and he got trained to be the fire chief as a 17-year-old. So, not saying you have to be a firefighter necessarily, but there are opportunities wherever you live, and so it's just a matter of taking advantage and maybe in sometimes creating those opportunities. There was a young scholarship recipient a few years ago in her rural part of North Carolina, saw that there was a need for clothing and school supplies and weekend meals for students in a particular the mountain part of North Carolina she lived in. And so as a middle school student, she started working on a place that collects and provides resources to people who need that in their community. So it doesn't have to be a global endeavor. It doesn't have to have a $3 million grant that you received. You don't have to be published in a referee journal. Some scholars do that. But others, again, are finding opportunities to serve and to demonstrate the positive impact they're having in their school and community. So that's what we look for. We look for an authentic presentation of those things as well, and a good reference along the way. We don't ask for a reference until those who advance to phase two of our process, but somebody who can speak to your character, to speak to your perseverance, your willingness to work hard, maybe harder than you think you need to or should, but you persevere through those challenging times, and we like to see that along the way.
Yeah, that's I think some really great advice for students and just encouragement just to be looking for looking, I think especially just within your community where there might be a need, and just it's a good, definitely need more people like that in the world who are looking to help. But there's certainly no shortage of that. And, again, it's just the reminder, it's all like in the context of, what you're involved with, what your opportunities are. And then also in the classroom,
Right.
where, we, ever, the reviewers will know that, some
Hmm.
schools are offering like full IB diploma and like 15 AP classes. Like some, there might be like one AP class or zero APs in your school, and just wanting to see that you've taken advantage of your opportunities. And even there, I think I would encourage students to like, you know, think, to kind of think beyond where there might be other opportunities. I know like on like edX and Coursera, there's like free
Hmm.
online like AP courses, that can just be like a really like, great enrichment opportunity and just like a great way to also be a little bit of a self-starter. And
Right. And that demonstrates intellectual curiosity and a willingness to kind of do beyond the conventional. And I will say, in terms of the academics, we have a fairly a lower academic threshold than many other scholarship programs. Students just have to demonstrate at least a B average or a 3.0 overall in at least three courses of each of English, science, social studies, and math. So if you've gotten, three A's and a couple of B's, you can just tell us about the three A's, although B's are fine. You don't submit a transcript until those who advance to the second round of our application. We're looking more for positive impact through your leadership and service, and that you have at least a B overall, which tells us you can be successful in a college curriculum.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good reminder. I think a misconception sometimes students have is that you must be like a 4.0, 36 HCT, 10 to 12 AP class, courses
Right.
type student. That certainly is not a bad thing, but I think a good reminder that it's not exactly just a, purely numerical exercise and who has like the
Right.
GPA and test scores.
Yeah, my job in managing our selection process would be so much easier every cycle if it was purely quantitative, but it's not. We want to see the human behind the numbers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just, yeah, good reminder, just that this is like a very human centered process. And just keeping, I think for students, just like keeping that in mind. I think it segues a little bit to something else I've been curious about, just with, AI becoming a, bigger part of students' educational journeys. I think some ways for better, some ways for worse. We have been encouraging students, I think more on the college side and like recently on the scholarship side to just check in with an institutional organizational policy regarding AI. So curious, I guess, kind of two-part question, what the Coca-Cola Foundation's policy is, and then just if you have
Hmm.
any kind of practical thoughts have how students should be navigating this new technology.
Hmm. I have strong feelings about it, but since this is a professional podcast, I'll keep it professional. Um, and I'll say to our industry through our professional body, the National Scholarship Providers Association, we do a lot of info sharing and best practices and a lot of questions of like, how are you dealing with all of this? And we're still trying to figure it out in the same way university college admissions are, but
Mhm.
also every college and every department and every professor in a department are trying to figure out how are we going to use all the AI tools that are out there. But what we do consider it is a tool. It's a tool that could be useful in getting the same kind of feedback that you might get if you were fortunate enough to be able to provide or to hire a private college counselor or coach along the way. If you come from a very well-resourced school with a great college guidance counselor who could give you feedback on draft after draft of essay. Um, Policy officially wise, we do have within our application process two affirmative statements where applicants are asked to agree and to affirm that their submission was not created or submitted by not only an AI type program, but not another human being or a
Mhm.
professional college coach and those kinds of things. And those who advance to phase two, where we ask for essays, we ask them to tick a box to again affirm that what has been submitted was not created or submitted by an outside entity. Now, there's the middle part of editing, revising that it seems perfectly reasonable to draft something based on your experience and drop it into an AI program to get some feedback on the strength of the writing. It's in some ways a democratizing tool, a leveling tool to give students who, again, may not have a well-resourced college counseling office or a private college counselor, but they probably got a phone and they can download some apps and drop it in there
Yeah.
and get some feedback. So again, we just don't want it to be wholly created by or submitted by anyone or anything other than the named applicant. For our readers who look at those essays and all the other submissions, the descriptions of their leadership and service impact, we do talk about how those clearly AI generated statements stand out. What looks like sounds like a robot wrote it,
Mhm.
that no human voice, mind, tongue, fingers, whatever touched the statement that was submitted. Even if we're looking at about 120 semifinalists in each of 10 different selection districts. So about 1,200 advance to the second round before they are interviewed in the final stage. So of those 120, 25 are identified to be interviewed. Readers are looking for both a reason to rule somebody in to be interviewed and rule somebody out. So if there is an inkling maybe that some uh, AI program created, edited, fully uh, a whole creation of a program, that may be reason enough to rule it out. So even if you use it for revisions, for feedback, you want to make sure that you don't just copy paste that. You want to make sure you revise it, spend time with it, make sure that the voice, the tone, the words, are your voice, are your tone.
I think that's, yeah, just really, really like sensible, practical advice for students. I agree. I think there's certainly a role. I as a former like school counselor myself, I think it is exciting just that I was at a private high school where I had 35 advisees. I could
Hmm.
very carefully read and provide give a lot of feedback on essays. I know every student doesn't have that was not my high school experience. I know a lot of students don't have that.
Hmm.
opportunity, and it does a pretty good job, I think, of just some like proofreading and
Hmm.
flagging grammar and typos and some general feedback. But yeah, I think it's almost too good where you have to give some guardrails, and like you don't want it to do the work for you or do the
Right.
thinking or do the creation. And I think still read a lot of essays as part of my work here. And it's just very interesting. Just I think it is very apparent when something
Hmm.
just seems off. I think it does. I think you know, it lacks the personality, it lacks stories,
Yeah.
I think, and that sometimes students forget that it's not, like, about being writing the most impressive essay. It's I think students, readers, and, committees would rather just understand who you are as a human being and just, like, get
Right.
a sense of your humanity, and just to be interesting. I think that can be an underrated saying something that's interesting
Yeah.
as I'm reading my,
Yeah.
like, 50, 30 to 50 essays or whatever during the day, like a lot of them blur together. And
Right.
if it's something that's really has me at the edge of my seat, I think you've done a good job.
Yeah, exactly. If you can be creative, if you can be an authentic, share your authentic voice along the way, even if it doesn't conform to the standard 3 or 5 paragraph structure, even though our word count doesn't allow really for that, but kind of getting away from almost the cliche college admissions
Mhm.
application structure.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an interesting, definitely interesting technology. But I think a good reminder just for there are many scholarship providers and admissions
Mhm.
applications that just will have you consent to that. And just there, definitely can be, ramifications for students if that like is very,
Right.
very, very clear that you were like misusing, against the policy. And I think even if in the absence of a policy, I still would just, err on the side of caution and just, use these tools as a way of getting feedback for brainstorming, just like really encourage students not to have it do the actual work.
Yeah. And I would say too, like, even if you use it for the essays and you manage to slip through, you make it seem human enough, it comes out in the interview. So if you're applying for something that includes an interview with the person who shows up on the screen does not match who's on paper in terms of their articulation and their thought process, it's evident that way. And again, at that stage for us, we're interviewing 25 finalists intending to award 15. So we're looking really for ways to rule out 10 people. So if there's a disconnect between what your written submission was and who you are when you show up, doesn't say you can't be nervous and babble a little bit because it can be nerve-wracking when they tell us in the interviews, but we wanna see authenticity and articulation of what's important to you and the impact that you're having there, and if that doesn't match what you submitted in your writing, that can be a flag, and it can also be a flag if it's such a beautifully written series of essays and you've gotten lower grades in the writing-intensive courses like history and English and those kind of things, but stronger grades in the more quantitative-oriented things, like, there's something amiss here.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And I think it's yeah, that's such a great reminder that there's human beings, not algorithm, or whether it's Coca-Cola or college, or you're also putting together this like this cohort, this community of people that you really believe in, and you're excited about spending time together, having this for Coca-Cola, this like wonderful history that goes back
Mhm.
almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So that's just and I also just think it's to a student's benefit just to be themselves. And
Mhm.
I think that can require a little bit of like thinking in your essays. And sometimes students think, oh, but I haven't like done anything that's like that impressive. And I think for an
Mhm.
essay, and like when I think of my favorite all time essay, it was a student who lived in Kentucky who just wrote about her drive home from school, and it was just really funny and interesting, just as she just the things that she saw on her drive
Mhm.
home. And it was you know nothing crazy happened in the essay, nothing that
Yeah.
was it was just a little slice of her life. And there's something that was I still think about that sometimes, and was just like always comes to me when I think about essays that I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I probably read, and you probably have too, tens of thousands of essays over our careers, and I can think about, as you're saying that, the opening lines of at least 3 or 4 in this moment that really stuck with me, some in a great way, some not great way, and, like, "Oh, wow, that was a weird word choice there," but it kind of, provides grist for the mill for when giving advice like this.
Yes, exactly. As I'm sure, just given your experience at Coca-Cola, just you field a lot of just questions and misconceptions from students. And I'm curious, what are some of the common misconceptions that students might have about the scholarship program?
Yeah, I think I touched on some of this earlier, but the first thing I'll say is that we don't use AI to make our decisions. It drives me crazy. I lurk on Reddit and College
Yeah.
Confidential and all the boards after decisions go out. Like, I don't know how they can do that. We have a process, and we have humans involved at every stage. We don't have a robot or AI making decisions. So believe me if you will. I know you won't, because you'll show up on Reddit later this year. But again, as I said earlier, I think if you look at the listing of every cohort of scholars the last several years, you may think you have to have published 3 articles in referee journals and founded a nonprofit when you were 5 years old, and or some startups. And again, some have done a lot of impressive things, but what again is more important is that you're finding ways to serve your school and your community in positive ways that have a positive impact for those around you, that you are very others oriented. It's not all about yourself trying to win all the awards and build a long list. Now, you may get a long list and win a lot of awards because of what you're doing, but it's evident when that's the driving force with applicants, that you're just trying to win the point, or you're trying to win the award and create an impressive list. I'll say that about over the last several cycles, in the 11 cycles that I've been here for, about 15% of the 150 scholars every year are first generation college students themselves. So we know we're having a positive impact on people who maybe didn't see college as necessarily the way forward for them. And about half report that they come from households with household incomes under the level that a lot of colleges are using to completely waive tuition and
Mhm.
fees, somewhere in the 100 to 200,000 range. So we know that the financial impact of a relatively small scholarship is $20,000 over the course of 10 years, not 20,000 a year.
Mhm.
But we know, based on, again, those measures that so many schools are using to waive tuition and fees, we know that we have about half of our students report household incomes at that level. So we know it's having a positive impact. So I would say the advice I would give if you look at those lists, don't let it discourage you. If you know that you are doing the things I'm saying, you found ways to serve and lead in your school and community that's having a positive impact, we want to see your application.
Mhm. No, and I think you hit on one of the last things I wanted to ask, just for students feeling
Hmm.
discouraged, just because any highly selective process, I know sometimes students can count themselves out,
Hmm.
or just have this idea that it's just going to be impossible to win. And just your reminder, just I think a lot of those things that you highlighted, those are going to whether the student ultimately becomes a Coca-Cola scholar or not. I think that having that mentality and that mindset in your admissions and your scholarship search,
Hmm.
that's going to absolutely pay off, and you're going to find some wonderful schools, some wonderful funding options, and just kind of carrying that into your college journey as you begin your freshman year.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah.
And I know, yeah, definitely the I think for students to stay off of Reddit a little bit. I think there's a lot of.
Yeah.
I also do the same. I think, I don't know. Sometimes there is some decent advice, but sometimes there is just advice that is disconnected from the from
Right.
the truth. But it's very interesting to look at and to sort of see the student take.
Yeah, always a lot of sour grapes too, and it takes everything I have not to respond to everything that is just factually inaccurate. Like, oh, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I shouldn't even be looking at this. I'm certainly not responding to it. But in terms of feeling discouraged about applying for something as selective as ours, like I said, about last year, 270,000 people started an application, 150 total get the
Mm.
scholarship. So the math of it all can be discouraging. But 2 things I'll share with you: you got to be in it to win it. That's the old, I think, motto of the New York State Lottery. You got to be in it to win it.
Sure.
You should not rule yourself out of not only scholarships, but college, jobs, awards, internships. Those of us who sit on the other side, that's my job. That's my job to figure out how to say no, and Will's job in his previous career. It's our job to figure out who to say no to, but you never know what you might submit in your application that's going to spark a bit of interest that will allow us to say yes to you. So don't be discouraged. It will take some time to apply. So the first piece of advice I give is, don't count yourself out. Get that application in. The second piece of advice I'll give is linked to that, but you've got to treat it almost like a part-time job that may not pay off until many months down the line. If you can find 5 to 10 hours a week, which may sound crazy given a load, class load that you might have your senior year. It might be hard to find that, but researching, writing, drafting essays, adapting essays from one college to another. We're all fundamentally asking about who you are as a person, about your leadership, what impacts you, what are you curious about. You don't have to start from scratch necessarily unless the college or scholarship application says you cannot adapt something you've used for something else. Most of us just want to hear your best effort. So adapt essays, adapt submissions along the way. Keep a running list, create a Google sheet. My two kids, who are both college age, hated being my children when they were applying for colleges and internships and scholarships, but I knew what I was doing and I could help them with this. So create a Google sheet or a sheet to track all the things you might want to apply for, that you have applied for, follow up, ask for clarification on questions. But again, treat it like a part-time job that can pay off down the line. Know that you won't necessarily get 100% of everything you apply for, but you get 0% of the things you don't apply for. And I feel like I'm Michael Scott on The Office saying, quoting Wayne Gretzky, you can miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to submit that application.
I think that's just so much great advice there. But just could not agree more. And I think it's just such a good skill, a good muscle of just like
Mhm.
being resilient and just like having like this can do optimistic spirit that is possible. And I'm sure there's students who are shocked when they get the notification
Mhm.
that they won, and probably were like doubting themselves at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Every year we bring the new scholars to Atlanta for Coca-Cola Scholars Weekend. We have a leadership program. They go through 150 scholars from around the country. And there's always about 10 to 15 who will grab me privately and say, I don't understand why I'm here. I don't know. I don't measure up. There's some imposter syndrome that may happen. And we tell them, like, we saw something amazing in you and you need to lean into that and own it. You deserve to be here with these other folks. So, but yeah, even when they get it and they're here, they sometimes don't believe it still.
Yeah. No, that's a good reminder for everyone listening. Um, well, this has been wonderful, Jamie. Thank you so much for
Sure.
the
Thank you.
time. We'll definitely be linking to the application, and I think this is, we'll be sending this out to students and
Mhm.
families so they have some advice just to keep in mind as they're thinking about this opportunity. Obviously, it's super helpful for the Coca-Cola program, but I think a lot of the
Mhm.
advice and lessons from this conversation are applicable, college
Mhm.
admissions and for other scholarship programs. So thank you.
It The feedback we've gotten, our application phase 1 is open August and September on the early side. What the feedback we've gotten from applicants, even if they didn't persist, they tell us that this allowed me to get my stuff organized to apply for college, to apply for other scholarships. So even if they didn't win our scholarship, they're better positioned to be competitive down the road and not get bogged down in like, oh, it's December. I've got all my college applications
Mhm.
in. Now I need to find, you can do those simultaneously. And us being early enough, we've gotten that positive feedback. So use it as a training exercise, if nothing else.
I think that's great. Definitely much better to be earlier on this process than waiting until the
Absolutely.
very, very last minute. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for the time, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Office Hours with Will Geiger. If you're a student or parent, don't forget to check out app.scholarships360.org, where you can sign up for our free scholarship matching platform. For colleges, we've got solutions to make your work easier, which you can check out at connect.scholarships360.org. And one last thing, if you or someone you know would make a great guest on the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me by email or on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks again for listening.